Welcome back to the deep dive. You hand us the complete file on a subject, and we give you the analysis, the context, and, well, the key insights you need to really be informed. Today, we are taking a long, luxurious, and I think surprisingly strategic look at the life and the business of Jackie Collins.
It's one of those cases where the source material reads like fiction itself. You know, a classic rags to riches, scandal to success story, but all the numbers, all the facts are real. Our mission today is to get past that public image, the leopard print, the glamour, all of that overt sex appeal, and really understand the sharp business mind and, frankly, the ferocious dedication that kept her career going.
Absolutely. She was a master strategist, sort of operating under the guise of this flamboyant novelist.
She really was.
Exactly. Our listener wants the shortcut to understanding the trajectory and the truly dual life of the woman who didn't just write the modern airport novel. She basically defined it. And when we talk about success, I mean, we're talking about a commercial machine, 32 novels.
30.
And every single one of them a New York Times bestseller. Global sales past 500 million copies. Translations into 40 languages. That's not just writing. That is building a global brand.
Well, that kind of consistency over decades, it's almost unheard of. It's like a perfect batting average in the most competitive market in publishing. She never, not once, faltered in giving her audience exactly what they wanted.
And she never apologized for it, did she?
Never. That's what's so crucial. She would say, you know, I'm not a literary writer. Her success was built on this profound, almost sociological understanding of what people really wanted to read, no matter what the critics thought. She tapped into the forbidden, the glamorous, the intensely sexual, and she did it with total confidence.
So that's what we're unpacking, this strategic life. We're going to dive into the scandalous start that launched her career because, you know, nothing works better than a bit of controversy. We'll trace her critical move to Hollywood and her genius research method as this quiet observer. We'll spend a good amount of time dissecting the literary universe she built, anchored by her most powerful character, Lucky Santangelo. And then finally, we'll look at the quiet, devastating tragedies she was facing while she was writing about all this endless glamour and liberation.
It really is a study in contrasts. The public spectacle versus the private focus. The writer who knew everyone else's secrets while keeping her own so closely guarded. That tension, I think, is the fuel for her entire career.
Okay, let's unpack this journey. Let's start right at the beginning, in mid-century London.
Jacqueline Jill Collins, born in Hampstead, London in 1937. And the context of her childhood is it's absolutely vital to understanding everything that comes later. She didn't grow up sheltered.
Not at all. She grew up in the epicenter of show business ambition.
Exactly.
I mean, that family environment is the first key piece of context. Her father, Joseph William Collins, he wasn't just a theatrical agent. He was a top-level operator. His clients included Shirley Bassey, the Beatles.
The Beat right as they were becoming a global phenomenon. And Tom Jones. What does growing up in that kind of atmosphere teach you?
It teaches you about the business side of fame.
Exactly. The transactional nature of it, the egos, the high stakes, the money, and the constant performance that you need to succeed.
She wasn't just near celebrity, she was completely immersed in the business of selling spectacle. And we should probably note her mixed heritage, too, which likely added another layer to her upbringing. Her father was South African, born Jewish, her mother British Anglican, and while her older sister Joan was, pursuing the acting path, Jackie was already showing these signs of rebellion and, surprisingly, this very specific, very marketable talent for storytelling.
Oh, that rebellion defines her early teenage years. She went to Francis Holland School, which is this reputable independent day school for girls. But that kind of formality, it just didn't suit her temperament. And the pivotal fact is that she was expelled at age 15. She later fully embraced this identity, admitting she was a school dropout and a juvenile delinquent. She even said she was glad she got all of that out of her system at an early age. That early break with convention, I think it gave her the perspective of an outsider looking in, which is essential for a writer.
And here is where we see the direct line, the connection between that rebellious teenager and her eventual career. She made this incredible claim that even at 13, while she was still at school, her classmates would actually pay her.
Pay her?
To listen to the sex scenes she wrote during her lessons.
It's astonishing, isn't it? Long before she had a book deal, she had a self-sustaining commercial venture centered around salacious content. She'd already found her market.
She'd identified that people were hungry for these kinds of scandalous, boundary-pushing stories.
She discovered her voice and her audience at the same time, which confirmed that what she found interesting, other people did too. That early confidence, that sense of, I can monetize this, that's the foundation of her entire publishing empire.
And the most eye-opening story that confirms the kind of fast life she was living at 15 is the reported brief affair with Marlon Brando.
Right.
He was 29 at the time.
It's a detail that, frankly, sounds like it belongs in one of her own novels. Brando was already a global superstar, a symbol of this raw, dangerous masculinity. For a 15-year-old girl to be involved in that kind of scenario, it just speaks volumes about the chaotic, high-stakes world she was already in.
She later kind of downplayed it, called it a schoolgirl crush. That was fun. But the sheer fact that it happened reinforces this idea that her life was often as dramatic as her fiction. She wasn't just going to be writing about Hollywood from the outside. She was gathering real lived experience, even if it was, tumultuous and premature. It gave her an authenticity that critics couldn't just dismiss.
And she did initially try to follow her sister Joan into acting. In 1956, she moved to L.A. to visit Joan, trying to get groomed for stardom at 20th Century Fox.
But that dream was pretty short-lived. She couldn't get a work permit and had to go back to London.
Yeah, her acting detour was just a series of attempts that never quite took off. She ended up in a bunch of British B-movies in the late 50s and early 60s. She was often credited as Lynn Curtis. Things like Barnacle Bill in 57, The Shakedown in 1960, a few small TV spots. But then she gave it up. And you have to ask why.
Well, the actress is dependent on everyone else, right? The script, the director.
Casting agent. The writer controls the entire universe. And that's the pivot she made.
And that pivot was really catalyzed by some external validation. But it was validation that saw her true power. She'd started a bunch of stories and just abandoned them, found it hard to finish. It was her second husband, Oscar Lerman, who made the difference.
Right. He owned nightclubs. He was part of that whole scene. And he saw her ability to just captivate people with stories. He was the one who told her to finish that first novel.
Yeah.
He just said to her, you're a storyteller.
And that simple intervention shifted her focus completely, away from the camera, toward the typewriter. And the result, The World is Full of Married Men, published in 1968, it wasn't just a book launch, it was a cultural explosion designed to burn down the old way of doing things.
It was an absolute fireball. This is where her strategy of leveraging outrage really began, whether it was intentional at first or not. The book was immediately controversial because it didn't just hint at infidelity and sex. It dove right in with unflinching detail.
And that controversy launched her career. The specific response from the romantic novelist Barbara Cartland, it's the stuff of publishing legend.
Oh, it's perfect. Cartland, who was the queen of this wholesome, chaste romance, called the book nasty, filthy, and disgusting.
You can't buy that kind of marketing. I mean, that critique, coming from the personification of traditional literary romance, it immediately framed Collins as this dangerous modern rebel who was writing the truth no one else dared to.
And Cartland didn't even stop there. She specifically accused Collins of creating every pervert in Britain.
Incredible.
I mean, if you were a young person in 1968 looking for something scandalous to read, what is more enticing than a book that's been condemned by literary royalty?
It had real commercial impact, too. The book was banned in Australia and South Africa. But the scandal, just as you'd expect, sent sales through the roof in the U.S. and the U.K.
The lesson was clear. Outrage, when you manage it correctly, is a phenomenal sales driver. She was instantly established as the queen of the taboo, the woman writing about the things of polite society, and the critics pretended didn't exist.
And she cemented that success with breakneck speed. Her second novel, The Stud, followed just a year later in 1969, and it also soared onto the bestseller lists. That speed is so important because it showed the industry she wasn't a one-hit wonder.
Right. She wasn't just lucky with one controversy. By the 70s, she wasn't just riding a wave. She was establishing a market. People were already considering her a peer of authors like Sidney Sheldon and Harold Robbins. Her emergence really signaled that a female writer could command that huge popular market not by writing romance, but by writing about female power, sex, and intrigue, often with more grit than her male counterparts.
And you can see her experimenting as she goes. Her third novel, Sunday Simmons and Charlie Brick, came out in 1971. The U.S. title was The Hollywood Zoo. So she's already testing the waters of that American celebrity setting that would become her brand.
She realized the unique power of the Hollywood setting, a place where people go specifically to become someone they're not.
And then in 1974, with Lovehead, which was later retitled The Love Killers, she made another pivotal discovery for her career: organized crime.
Yes. The sources confirmed that this foray into the world of gangsters, mixing crime with high society and passion, it proved to be extremely successful. This blends of genres, crime thriller, social expose, erotic drama, that was her key innovation. She wasn't just writing about sex, she was writing about power. And that paved the way for her most iconic creation.
She kept up this incredible pace all through the decade. The world is full of divorced women in 75, lovers and gamblers in 77. This machine gun pace just ensured she was always on the bestseller lists.
And crucially, we see the early synergy between her writing and film. And again, it's connected to her sister. She co-wrote the screenplay for the 1978 film of The Stud, which starred Joan Collins as the infamous Fontaine Khalid.
Then she writes the book sequel The Bitch in 1979, which also became a successful film, with Joan reprising the role and Jackie writing that screenplay too.
It's a closed-loop media strategy long before we were all talking about content franchises. Jackie writes the outrageous story, Joan stars in the movie, and both of their careers are lifted up by the joint notoriety of the sexy, glamorous Collins sisters. They were the ultimate 80s media partnership.
And what's crucial here is that even when she was co-writing those screenplays, she was already asserting control over the visual product. She was setting the expectation that she was more than just a novelist.
She understood that Hollywood often sanitizes or just misinterprets the source material. And if she wanted her unique, edgy vision to be maintained, she had to be in the writer's room. This mastery of the multimedia opportunity is exactly what led to her most strategic decision of all: the permanent move to Los Angeles.
Right. So the move to Los Angeles in the 1980s, it was not a lifestyle choice. It was a corporate expansion. She had established herself as a best-selling author, but she realized that to chronicle the rich and famous, you needed constant first-hand access. So she and her family made a strategic full-time relocation.
This is the moment she starts treating her career like a true business. She understood geography as destiny, and she actually codified her thinking with this truly strategic quote. She said, "If you wish to be successful, there is a place you should be at a certain time." And Los Angeles in the 1980s was it.
That's pure business strategy, placing her operational headquarters right in the center of her product market.
And the 1980s were just peak excess for Hollywood. The rise of the super agent, the explosion of these expensive primetime soaps, the obsession with celebrity culture and all the money fueling it. By moving into the hills above Sunset Boulevard, she started collecting the genuine knowledge that would just redefine her career.
But that raises a big question, right? If you're a glamorous celebrity yourself, how do you get people's genuine secrets? Everyone around you is performing. How do you tell the difference between the public show and the private trauma?
That is the genius of her research method. The writer Dominic Dunn, who moved in the same elite circles, he provided the answer. He noted that while Collins was a great party-goer, always glamorous, always there, she went to these events more as an observer than participant.
She wasn't chasing the spotlight, she was gathering data.
She was basically an industrial spy operating in plain sight. She was listening for dialogue, for the microaggressions, for the social anxieties hidden under the designer dresses. She was fictionalizing the patterns of behavior she saw, which reinforces her core advice to writers: write about what you know. This is why her books, even with all the sensationalism, always felt grounded. They had the texture and the specific, believable flavor of LA life because she was taking notes.
And that rigorous, disciplined observation led directly to her most commercially explosive novel, Hollywood Wives, 1983. This wasn't just a hit. It was a defining cultural moment that just crystallized the entire era.
The commercial metrics are staggering. It hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list immediately. It went on to sell over 15 million copies. And the marketing was brilliant. It was openly sold as a scandalous expose.
A tell-all, promising to rip the velvet curtains back on the people America was watching on TV every single week.
And the timing, with her sister, it couldn't have been better. Hollywood Wives elevated Jackie to near equal status celebrity-wise with Joan, who was dominating global culture as Alexis Colby in Dynasty. They were this joint phenomenon, defining the global conversation about glamour, power, and shoulder pads.
Naturally, Hollywood Wives was fast-tracked for adaptation. In 1985, it became this massive, star-studded television miniseries produced by Aaron Spelling, the king of primetime soap.
The cast alone tells you how big the book was. Candace Bergen, Stephanie Powers, Angie Dickinson, Anthony Hopkins, Suzanne Summers, Rod Steiger. It was an event.
But despite the success, this is the crucial turning point where we see Collins start to push back aggressively against external creative control. She was credited as a creative consultant, but she later made it very clear she was never actually consulted.
And this is the strategic insight. She realized that Hollywood, even when adapting her expose, would ultimately sanitize the work for network television. She disagreed with some of the casting, finding them too bland, too far removed from the grit of her characters, so the title creative consultant was meaningless.
The miniseries was a huge commercial success, but for Jackie Collins, it was a failure in maintaining artistic integrity. It taught her that to preserve her vision, she needed deeper executive-level involvement. She couldn't just sell the rights anymore.
Exactly. This is what spurred her to take serious creative control over all the later adaptations. We'd seen her co-write screenplays, but now she aimed higher.
And we see that transformation with her Lucky Santangelo series. In 1990, she didn't just publish the novel Lady Boss, she actively wrote and co-produced the television miniseries Lucky Chances. And this miniseries combined her first two Lucky novels and starred Nicolette Sheridan and a very young Sandra Bullock.
Moving from selling rights to becoming a writer and co-producer, that is a monumental shift in power, especially in 1990s Hollywood television. She was now dictating how her characters looked, sounded, and acted on screen. She was making sure the tone matched her books, the sharp dialogue, the explicit sexuality, the real-world power dynamics.
She did it again in 1992, writing and producing another miniseries based on the Lady Boss novel starring Kim Delaney. She was proving she wasn't just a best-selling novelist, she was an executive producer who understood the machinery of television production.
It connects right back to her youth. Her father was the powerful figure connecting talent to the stage. Jackie ultimately gained that control herself, but through narrative ownership and self-production. She learned from the Hollywood Wives experience that if you want your dangerous, unsanitized vision maintained, you can't just be an advisor. You have to be the one holding the contract.
She fully inhabited the persona of a lady boss in her business dealings. The synergy was perfect. Living the life, using the life as material, and then controlling the visual adaptations of that material. Okay, now that we've seen how she mastered the business side, we absolutely have to look deeper into the literary universe she created, specifically her most important, powerful character, Lucky Santangelo.
If Jackie Collins had a fictional alter ego, a protagonist who embodied the glamour, the danger, and the ultimate unrelenting control she sought, it was Lucky Santangelo. She was introduced in the novel Chances in 1981, and this really marks the moment when Collins moved beyond writing just about society scandal and into crafting a genuine empire saga.
Lucky is her signature masterpiece. The initial description is so vital because it establishes her duality. She's the dangerously beautiful daughter of a mob boss. This character synthesized everything Collins had been experimenting with. The high-stakes crime element from the 70s and the high-society Hollywood glamour of the 80s. Lucky is the perfect blend of street smarts and high-class polish.
And the longevity of the Lucky Santangelo saga is just incredible. It's a 10-book series that anchored her writing career for over 3 decades, running from Chances in 1981 all the way through to her final novel, The Santangelos, in 2015.
She gave a sense of conclusion to her most famous creation right before she passed away herself.
And what's fascinating about a series with that kind of lifespan is the character's evolution. It mirrors the growing power of women in business and culture during that time. Lucky doesn't just age, she acquires power. She goes from being the daughter of the powerful figure, Gino Santangelo, to essentially wielding his influence herself.
Right. Running Las Vegas casinos, navigating vendettas, dominating her universe through sheer will. She's often ruthless, but always justified, within the terms of her world.
The titles alone tell the story of escalation and control. Chances, Lucky, Lady Boss, Vendetta. Lucky's Revenge, Dangerous Kiss, Drop Dead Beautiful. She just keeps escalating. She ensured that Lucky always had the final word, always got her revenge, and always maintained control over her financial and her emotional life.
And this is where we return to those subtle details that really cement her technique. We have to talk about the Lucky Santangelo cookbook.
The cookbook, yes. Published in 2014, a cookbook for a gangster's daughter who runs casinos. It sounds like a ridiculous marketing tie-in, but it is pure Collins genius.
It does seem absurd on the surface, but it reinforces the immersive nature of her fictional universe. And more importantly, it lets her embed those little nuggets of darkness we mentioned. It has recipes alongside the character's narrative, but here's the detail from the source material that is just so profound. Included in this cookbook is a flashback of Lucky watching her father throw a plate of food at her mother as a child.
Wow. That moment of domestic violence and trauma of volatility and fear tucked into a recipe book celebrating high-end cuisine. It's the ultimate example of her signature technique. She puts trauma and dysfunction right beneath the surface of the spectacle. It reminds you that even Lucky, the ultimate lady boss, comes from a messy, volatile background where power dynamics were learned through fear.
It proves her interest was never purely in escapism. She was exploring how people survive and even thrive in environments defined by chaos and danger. And it connects directly to that thematic evolution we saw earlier.
From simple sexual scandals in '68 into organized crime with Lovehead in '74, which was extremely successful. The Santangelo saga just fully capitalized on this powerful combination of money, crime, and high-stakes relationship.
But Lucky wasn't her only empire. Beyond the Santangelo saga, she maintained and expanded her other core franchise, the Hollywood universe, which acted as this ongoing, decade-by-decade snapshot of LA power.
That's right. The Hollywood series isn't just a sequence of books, it's a structural analysis of the LA power ecosystem. You start, of course, with Hollywood Wives in '83, which focuses on the women whose status comes from their famous husbands. But then she immediately followed that with Hollywood Husbands in '86.
Which shifts the focus. It's about the male ego, the infidelity, the desperate maneuvering of men clinging to youth and power in this ageist, hypersexualized industry.
And then came Hollywood Kids in 1994. And this book is arguably the most poignant. It focuses on the children who inherit the fame, the trauma, the money, and the dysfunction of growing up in that goldfish bowl. She was looking at intergenerational celebrity damage.
And then, as the new millennium dawned, she updated the franchise, Hollywood Wives. The new generation in 2001 looked at how power was being redefined in the post-internet celebrity landscape. And finally, Hollywood Divorces in 2003 centered on the inevitable fallout, the legal battles, the financial carnage.
So these novels weren't just light reading, they were a continuous critique. Each book in the Hollywood series tackled a different, specific facet of the power structures and pathologies of LA celebrity culture. She was showing us the system, the wives, the providers, the inheritors, and the inevitable dissolution. It's an incredibly comprehensive study wrapped in an accessible, page-turning package.
And she also introduced another distinct heroine, Madison Castelli, to expand her universe even further. Madison was an investigative journalist, a professional observer, a lot like Collins herself.
Right, Madison first appeared in this four-part serial called LA Connections in 1998, which was released in a newspaper every 6 weeks. That serialized release strategy just shows her continued, savvy understanding of media, using a popular format to introduce a new character to a mass audience outside of a traditional book launch.
And Madison, the journalist, later got her own full novels, like Lethal Seduction and Deadly Embrace. And she made it to the screen, too, with Paris Connections in 2010. Collins was a co-producer on that one as well. The commitment to franchising was total.
If you look at the common thread between Lucky Santangelo, the Hollywood Wives, and Madison Castelli, it's clear. They are all powerful, resilient women navigating these treacherous patriarchal systems, often using their sexuality, their intelligence, and their money as deliberate weapons. She was crafting the ultimate feminist fantasy of the era, not of polite empowerment, but of ruthless, unapologetic control.
And she gave us her philosophy on writing these characters, too. She said, "I loved writing about them, and you love reading about them. With age comes experience," and she was specifically referring to the bad boys of Hollywood.
That phrase, "with age comes experience," is key. It implies her writing wasn't just imagination or rumor. It was informed by a life lived fully, maybe even recklessly in her youth, and then observed critically in her adulthood. She was always the knowledgeable guide, assuring the reader, "I know the secrets, I know the trauma behind the spectacle, and I'm going to share them with you." But that public persona, the one who knew everyone else's secrets, was intentionally hiding a very different private reality.
This is where the deep dive gets really interesting, because it reveals the tension between the fantasy she sold and the life she actually lived. The person who wrote relentlessly about endless glamour and control and sex appeal was, at the same time, dealing with intense personal loss and genuine, profound tragedy behind the scenes. And she managed this extreme duality with, well, surgical precision.
The source material is very clear that this duality was intentional. She deliberately promoted this flamboyant public image, the bright clothes, the witty, slightly scandalous interviews, specifically to market her books. But that persona also served as a protective shield, allowing her to write about Hollywood's most guarded secrets while keeping her own life, which was marked by significant grief, intensely private.
When you look at the 3 major romantic relationships in her life, the pattern of loss is it's striking. All three ended tragically. It's an overwhelming amount of emotional chaos for someone whose professional life was dedicated to crafting narratives where chaos is ultimately controlled by the heroine.
Let's trace that path, because the nature of the loss really matters. Her first marriage was to Wallace Austin in 1960. They divorced 4 years later, in 64, after their relationship collapsed because of his addiction to drugs prescribed for manic depression.
So the separation itself was painful, but the tragedy escalated the following year. Austin died from a deliberate overdose, a suicide, just 1 year after their marriage ended. They had one daughter, Tracy, whom she then had to raise alone.
That level of darkness, self-destructive addiction, and then suicide, it must have been an immense burden, especially for a young woman trying to launch a career and raise a child. It's the complete antithesis of the glamorous, fun world she was writing about.
Absolutely. Then came her second relationship, which was really the stable center of her life, with Oscar Lerman. They married in 1965 and were together for 26 years until he died. Lerman was a big figure in his own right. He owned London's famous nightclubs Adlib and Tramp,
Which provided her with continuous access to that high society world she loved to observe. Lerman formally adopted Tracy, and they had 2 more daughters together, Tiffany and Rory.
So this was her period of greatest professional output and her greatest domestic stability. But then tragedy struck again when Oscar Lerman died of prostate cancer in 1992. Losing her longtime partner, the man who encouraged her to finish her first novel, just as she was peaking in Hollywood, must have been devastating.
And just 2 years later, she found love again, becoming engaged to a Los Angeles business executive, Frank Calcanini, in 1994. Again, the relationship was cut short. They were engaged for 4 years before tragedy intervened a third time. Calcanini died from a brain tumor in 1998.
3 profound, uncontrollable losses: a suicide, a long battle with cancer, and a brain tumor over 3 decades. It demands an incredible internal fortitude to carry that, particularly while you're maintaining a public facade that required constant energy and wit and sparkle.
And here is where we see her innate resilience and her incredible capacity for compartmentalization. When she reflected on these tragedies, she shared this remarkably positive outlook. She said she chose to deal with the grief by celebrating their lives as opposed to dwelling on their deaths.
It speaks to an incredible inner strength that allowed her to just keep creating and maintain her positive, focused trajectory. She simply refused to let loss define her.
And as she got into her later years, her independence became a source of great pride, a symbol of her self-made power that matched her literary heroines. In 2011, when somebody asked her about dating and marriage, she delivered this truly famous quote that just sums up her whole attitude.
She said, "I have a man for every occasion."
It's a statement of ultimate control, right? Turning the tables on traditional power dynamics. But she followed it up with an even more insightful comment that connected back to her childhood. She said, "When I was a kid growing up, I used to read my father's Playboy, and I'd see these guys, and they had fantastic apartments and cars. I have all of that now. Why would I want to hook myself up with one man when I've had 2 fantastic men in my life?"
That is so profound. She realized she had acquired the trappings of masculine power that she'd admired as a kid: the financial independence, the fantastic apartments, the cars, the autonomy, and she didn't need a man to provide them. She became the provider of the lifestyle, the true lady boss in her own right, both in fiction and in life. She reached the status that Lucky Santangelo achieved.
And this independence, coupled with her quiet focus, defined her later personal life. She held dual citizenship, and we get these great little authentic details about her personal habits that delightfully contrast with the Hollywood image she projected.
Right. She was the chronicler of extreme cosmetic surgery in Hollywood, but she claimed to have only had Botox once, and she hated it. She avoided elaborate salon routines, excessive shopping, which is almost unbelievable for someone constantly in the public eye promoting glamour.
And those quiet hobbies,
Yeah.
they are wonderfully domestic. This international novelist whose books are in 40 languages, whose characters are jetting between continents, she owned 4 TiVos and focused on television and tweeting. The irony is perfect. The person writing about nonstop action and chaos was maybe seeking quiet predictability in her own viewing habits.
It grounds her. It pulls her back from the fictionalized glamour and makes her feel like this disciplined, focused worker who prioritized her craft. And that dedication to her craft and her public service was eventually recognized. In 2013, she received an OBE Officer of the Order of the British Empire for services to fiction and charity, a far cry from the juvenile delinquent expelled from school at 15.
That recognition acknowledges the full journey, from scandalous provocateur to established, respected cultural figure. But all of this context, the resilience, the private loss, the commitment to the job, it makes the final hidden chapter of her life all the more astonishing. The level of control she exerted over her final years is perhaps the greatest testament to her character.
The story of Jackie Collins' final years is one of almost unimaginable discipline and secrecy. It is perhaps the most shocking secret she ever kept, and it fundamentally reshapes how we view her entire life of public performance. She died in 2015 from breast cancer at age 77, but the timeline of her illness, it's astounding.
It requires us to reassess the last decade of her career completely. She was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer more than 6 years before her death, and she managed to keep her illness almost entirely to herself during that entire period.
6 years. 6 years of writing bestsellers, promoting books, traveling the world, giving interviews, maintaining that glamorous, witty public persona, all while fighting a terminal illness that she refused to share. What extraordinary mental and emotional armor must that have required?
It underscores the ultimate power of that intentional dual identity. She created the flamboyant public image to market her books and protect her private life, and in her final 6 years, that public image became a protective armor that shielded her from pity, from distraction, from unsolicited advice. She made sure that her legacy and her final work were not defined by her illness, but by the glamour and narrative control she was known for. She was determined to write her own final chapter.
And the ultimate dramatic detail is the timing of her final disclosure. She only told her older sister, Joan Collins, with whom she shared so much history and career synergy, 2 weeks before she died.
Think about the profound implications of that secrecy for 6 years, especially from family members. It implies this profound desire to live her final chapter exactly as she chose, on her own terms, without the emotional weight and distraction that a public illness would bring. It allowed her to maintain focus and continue working until the absolute last moment. That dedication to her craft superseded almost every other relationship in her life during that period.
And her final public act perfectly illustrates this dedication to the performance of Jackie Collins. She flew from Los Angeles to London to appear on the ITV chat show Loose Women just 9 days before her death.
Still on stage, still promoting her brand, still delivering the witty sound bites and the confident persona, until the curtain absolutely had to fall. She didn't want her final image to be one of frailty. She wanted it to be one of unstoppable glamour and energy.
So, synthesizing all of this, the question remains, why does she remain so relevant to the learner interested in quick, impactful knowledge beyond just the sheer sales figures?
Well, firstly, the commercial mastery. She was a self-aware, strategic powerhouse. She never claimed to be a literary writer, yet she achieved this massive global commercial success, placing her in the same peer group as authors like Sidney Sheldon and Harold Robbins. Her success defined a generation of popular fiction and demonstrated that market appeal could completely override critical dismissal.
Secondly, her impact demonstrated the commercial power of embracing scandal and writing about subjects that might be considered taboo at the time. She didn't shy away from sex, power, or infidelity. She dove headfirst, and the outrage only fueled her sales. She capitalized on controversy better than almost anyone.
And finally, that narrative closure. Her final novel, The Santangelos, in 2015, wrapped up the entire Lucky Santangelo saga, providing millions of readers with a definitive sense of conclusion before she herself passed away. She was meticulous in ensuring her fictional family's story was complete.
She was a cultural architect who understood the media machine intimately. From her father's agency clients to the Hollywood casting couch to producing her own miniseries, right down to using her social life as research. Her work was a reflection of the power, money, and ambition she saw every day, filtered through the lens of strong, often vengeful female protagonists who, unlike herself, always had control over their destiny.
And that contrast, the fictional control versus the real-life chaos, is what makes her story so compelling. Her heroines always win, always get revenge, always find stability. But the woman writing those narratives was repeatedly struck by devastating, uncontrollable personal loss.
So what does this all mean? I think the most profound realization is that Jackie Collins managed to merge intense personal tragedy, losing 3 significant partners in such devastating ways, with professional spectacle. She used that flamboyant persona not just to sell books, but to shield a life marked by profound grief and extraordinary internal discipline.
She proved that sometimes the most successful chronicler of Hollywood's secrets and hidden traumas is the one who keeps her own life, and her own greatest struggle, the most tightly guarded secret of all. It makes you look at her heroines completely differently.
It's an incredible act of emotional control, especially over those final 6 years. The final provocative thought we'll leave you with, based on her admission that she was an observer who used her life for material. Was the creation of Lucky Santangelo, the dangerously beautiful gangster's daughter who commanded massive empires? Was that her way of embodying the power and ultimate control she desperately sought in a life that was so often marked by unexpected, tragic loss?
I mean, consider that the fictional Lucky always had the upper hand, always dictated terms, always secured her family. Meanwhile, the real Jackie had to endure the chaos and finality of death 3 times over. What are the other real-world secrets and personal struggles hiding behind the most dazzling, confident public careers we admire today? It suggests that sometimes the greatest glamour is simply the ability to keep working and keep smiling, no matter the private battle.
Something profound to mull over until our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.